What if everything you knew about humanity was a lie? What if Earth had been hiding its true power all along? The galaxy's most advanced empire thought they had already won, but they were about to face a revelation that would shake the very core of their existence. Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, where humanity's fight for survival turns into something much more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Stay with us to discover the secret weapons, the untold truths, and the epic battle that's just beginning. You won't believe what happens next. I stood still, my gaze fixed on the swirling holographic map before me, which shimmered with the images of the scattered human ships. Their once unified fleet now appeared as a constellation of broken formations, fleeing in every direction. Each movement of their vessels was erratic, desperate, as they tried to outrun the inevitable. The humans, who had once dared to challenge us, were now fleeing from the might of the hegemony. The vastness of the space around us felt cold, impersonal, as if the universe itself was watching this final collapse. Jupiter, that great gas giant, hung suspended in the distance, its massive storm swirling like the very chaos of the humans' failed resistance. The immense gravitational pull of the planet, once the protector of their outer defenses, now served as the last, pitiful defense line crumbling into oblivion. I turned to the tactical display beside me. A streak of crimson crossed the screen as one of their smaller vessels erupted in a burst of light, disintegrating under the fire of our weapons. Their shields, once so formidable, buckled under the relentless force of our advanced energy weapons. The human ship disintegrated almost instantly, its fragments scattering across the void like dust caught in a storm. "Their ships are nothing," Commander Choi muttered, his voice cold with the certainty of victory. He stood at my side, his stance unwavering, as he watched the destruction unfold. He was right. Their ships were crude, rudimentary designs compared to the sleek, invincible ships of the hegemony. Each of our vessels, massive and angular, absorbed the light around them, casting an imposing shadow that seemed to swallow the stars. As I observed the battle, I noticed something in the human fleet's behavior. Despite their overwhelming losses, their ships continued to scatter in every direction, evading our shots with an unpredictable, almost erratic strategy. It was as if they had learned to fight without any semblance of order, each ship moving as if its only goal was to survive, no matter the cost. There was a certain desperation to their movements that reminded me of a wounded animal fighting for its life. But, it was clear, it was all in vain. "Their resistance is finally breaking," Choi said, his voice tinged with a dark satisfaction. "They have no more room to retreat." I could feel a surge of triumph in my chest, the weight of 10 years of war finally coming to an end. The humans had fought valiantly, but it was always a matter of time. Their technology, their tactics, none of it was enough to stand against the might of the hegemony. I turned to Commander Choi, my 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a gesture of satisfaction among my species. "Prepare the fleet for the final push. Earth is defenseless." The tactical display flickered, showing the slow, inevitable collapse of their forces. The once proud human fleet was now reduced to a scattering collection of ships, each more vulnerable than the last. I felt no joy in their defeat, only a cold satisfaction that their fight, their struggle, had been for nothing. The battle had been hard fought, but their end was inevitable. "Send the report to High Command," I ordered, my voice steady. "The human resistance is broken. We begin our approach to Earth in 12 hours. I turned away from the display, my thoughts already moving forward, to the final conquest. Earth, the small blue planet that had stubbornly resisted our expansion for so long, was now ours. The hegemony would be complete. But as I looked back at the display, a nagging feeling stirred within me. Something was wrong. The humans had been unpredictable, but this was different. I pushed the thought aside. There was no room for doubt, not now. Today, the hegemony would claim victory, and humanity would be reduced to nothing more than a footnote in the history of our galaxy. The room was cold, the air thick with anticipation. The hum of ancient machinery reverberated softly, blending with the faint vibrations of the earth above. The bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, reinforced to withstand any force, seemed almost alive in its silence. It was as if the walls themselves held secrets, whispered from one generation to the next. General Song sat in the center of the room, his sharp gaze fixed on the holographic map that floated before him. The battle reports flickered across the display, images of shattered ships, crumbling defenses, and the scattered remnants of humanity's last resistance. Yet, there was no satisfaction in his expression. While it appeared that Earth's defenses had been overwhelmed, he could feel a gnawing unease gnaw at the edges of his mind. His fingers hovered above the control panel, commanding the data to pause. His eyes scanned each readout, but there was something off, something that did not sit right with the apparent chaos unfolding. Colonel Yun stood beside him, a picture of professional detachment, his voice calm but laced with the same quiet satisfaction that usually accompanied a successful operation. "Jupiter's defense line has fallen as planned," he said. Admiral Kim took the bait. "The humans have broken." "Have they?" General Song's voice was barely more than a whisper, but it carried the weight of years of experience. There was something about the way the human ships had retreated, the erratic nature of their movements, that didn't sit well with him. It didn't feel like the defeat they expected. He straightened his back and turned towards Colonel Yun. "Send the signal to the Phantom Fleet," he commanded, his voice now colder, more determined. "Operation Lazarus is now active." The room seemed to pulse with energy as the words left his lips. Colonel Yun stiffened, a brief flicker of understanding crossing his face. General Song had been preparing for this moment for years. No one, not even the highest echelons of Earth's command, knew about the Phantom Fleet's existence. 12 massive dreadnoughts, hidden in a dimensional pocket near Pluto, were now set to emerge. And when they did, the Hegemony would know the true power of humanity. Admiral Han, standing in the shadows of the room, nodded sharply, her face expressionless but her eyes betraying the weight of the knowledge she carried. "We've been hiding our true capabilities," she said, her voice icy, detached, but laced with a fierce pride. "And now it's time to reveal what we've been concealing." A chill spread across the room as General Song's eyes turned to the holographic display, where the 12 dreadnoughts were now outlined in the dimensional space beyond Pluto. The ships were unlike anything the Hegemony had encountered before. Massive, angular, and dark, these ships radiated an aura of power that sent a tremor down his spine. Each vessel was capable of unleashing enough firepower to obliterate entire continents with a single strike. "Are we ready?" General Song's voice broke through the tension, his gaze shifting between Admiral Han and Colonel Yun. "Ready as we'll ever be," Colonel Yun replied with certainty, though there was a flicker of anxiety in his eyes. Humanity had lived in the shadows for far too long, but now the time for secrecy had passed. The fleet would emerge from the depths of Pluto's orbit, and the true battle would begin. Admiral Han activated the holographic map, showing the entire system. The Hegemony fleet, in their predictable advance towards Earth, were unaware of the looming threat in the dark recesses of space. The distance between them and the Phantom Fleet was almost unimaginable. But time was on Earth's side, and every passing moment brought the dreadnoughts closer to their destination. As General Song watched the display, his mind raced through the years of deception. For 10 long years, Earth had fought with one arm tied behind its back. The human fleet had been deliberately weakened, its technologies concealed to create the illusion of fragility. From the very beginning, the Hegemony had been led to believe that humanity was a primitive species, unable to compete on an intergalactic scale. The Hegemony had taken the bait, and now, with the final push, humanity would reveal the truth. He turned back to the display, watching as the Hegemony fleet moved closer to Earth, their ships lit by the glow of distant stars. The human ships had scattered in apparent defeat, luring the Hegemony into a false sense of security. But now, the tide was about to turn. General Song felt the cold weight of certainty. The battle they had fought for so long, this war that had bled both sides, was about to end. And humanity would be the one to decide how it ended. The Phantom Fleet was more than just a hidden force. It was a message, a declaration that humanity would no longer bow to outside control. It was a final stand, a statement to the universe that Earth, long underestimated, was now ready to defend itself. "The signal has been sent," Admiral Han said, breaking the silence that had settled over the room. "They're on their way." The screens flickered as the first of the Dreadnoughts powered up its systems, ready to break free from the dimensional pocket. The time for subterfuge was over. The humans, who had appeared defeated and broken, were about to show the galaxy their true power. General Song's gaze turned toward the stars outside the window, his thoughts as cold and clear as the space before him. The Hegemony had thought Earth weak, but it was the Hegemony that had underestimated the humans. And now, Earth would show them what it meant to challenge the wrong species. The final act of this cosmic drama was about to begin. The battle for Earth was far from over, it was only just starting. Prepare for the final phase, General Song ordered, his voice unwavering. Humanity has revealed its hand. Let's see how the Hegemony responds. As the vast expanse of space stretched endlessly before us, the Hegemony fleet, in its imposing formation, advanced relentlessly toward Earth. The stars seemed to shrink away from the dark silhouettes of our ships, their shadows cast over the void like an omen. Commander Choi and I stood side by side, our eyes fixed on the holographic display as we watched the fleeing remnants of the human fleet break apart like fragile glass. Victory was within our grasp, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to savor it. "We've finally done it," Choi said, his voice a low murmur, tinged with satisfaction. "Soon, Earth will fall, and this war will be over." I nodded in agreement, my 4 eyes reflecting the cold, calculated triumph of the moment. We had fought for a decade, crushed their defenses one by one, and now, the humans, stubborn, primitive as they were, had no more tricks to play. They had exhausted their resources, their will, and their ships. There was nothing left to stop us. Yet, just as we were about to celebrate the final victory, something unexpected happened. The first anomaly appeared on our sensors as an eerie pulse of energy that seemed to ripple through the fabric of space itself. It was faint at first, a flicker at the edge of the solar system, barely detectable against the overwhelming background of the human retreat. But then it intensified, expanding outward in jagged pulses, each more powerful than the last. I leaned forward, narrowing my 4 eyes in concentration. "What is this?" I muttered under my breath. Commander Choi's expression shifted from one of confident victory to concern. This is not normal. There shouldn't be anything out there. The humans are already retreating. Why are there energy signatures like this now? Our sensors were picking up intense, unfamiliar readings, waves of energy that pulsed rhythmically, almost as if they were alive. The patterns were erratic, unpredictable, and most unsettling of all, far beyond anything human technology could produce. Could it be some kind of human weapon? Choi asked, though his voice lacked the certainty it had held moments ago. I turned to my science officer, Park, hoping for a rational explanation. She studied the data intensely, her brow furrowed with confusion. "Human technology shouldn't be capable of this," she said, her voice a mix of disbelief and apprehension. "These energy readings don't match anything we've cataloged. It's like nothing we've ever encountered." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. "Then what is it?" I asked, my mind racing with possibilities. The humans, though clever, had always been predictable in their failures. They were a species that had barely managed to master spaceflight, their technology limited to the primitive tools we had so easily overcome. This was beyond them. The readings intensified, becoming more chaotic, more disruptive. It was as if the fabric of space itself was being torn apart. I could feel my claws digging into the metal of the command console, tension building in my chest. Something was wrong. A creeping unease settled over me, something I had not felt since the early days of the war when humanity's unpredictability had first become apparent. Then, as if responding to our confusion, a transmission crackled through the fleet's communication network. The signal was faint, but there was no mistaking the words that came through. "Operation Lazarus," it echoed, the name striking me with a jolt, sending a shiver down my spine. Lazarus. I muttered, the name unfamiliar but ancient in its resonance. The humans had drawn upon their mythology for this. Lazarus, the dead man who returned to life. The resurrection of something thought lost. The dead coming back to challenge the living. Choi looked at me, his expression puzzled. What does that mean, Admiral? I didn't answer immediately. The name hung heavy in my mind, the implications far more terrifying than I could comprehend. The humans had never been known for such grandiose strategies. What did they mean by Lazarus? Had they truly hidden something from us all these years? Something far beyond their capabilities? Before I could voice my growing concern, Park's voice broke through the tension. The energy readings, they're growing stronger. They're coming from beyond Pluto. Something massive is moving. This isn't just a weapon, it's something else. A chill swept through the command deck as the fleet's sensors picked up more data. The pulses of energy were no longer sporadic, they were steady, deliberate. And then, a deep, unsettling hum filled the room, a sound emanating from the very edges of the solar system. It was a sound that resonated deep within, almost as if space itself was vibrating. We're not facing a primitive species anymore, I said slowly, my voice laced with disbelief. My 4 eyes flickered with unease. The humans, they've been hiding something. Something we didn't know about. I could feel the change in the atmosphere, as though the very air had thickened with the weight of this revelation. The reality of the situation was beginning to set in. The humans had allowed us to believe they were defeated, playing the part of the weak, cornered species. But now, they were showing us something else. Something powerful. Something hidden in the dark corners of the galaxy, waiting for its moment to emerge. The energy spikes on our sensors reached a critical level. I could almost taste the metallic tang of uncertainty in the air as the pulses grew in frequency and intensity. They were no longer just a curious anomaly, they were the heralds of something far more dangerous. Admiral, the energy signatures, they're no longer just pulses, Park reported, her voice trembling with the realization. They're forming structures. Massive objects are materializing from the energy source. Before she could finish, the sensors exploded in a cascade of data, and the room went silent. On the display, hundreds of massive shapes began to emerge from the void. Ships. But not just any ships. These were enormous, dark vessels, their forms alien and angular, unlike anything in the Hegemony's arsenal. The screen filled with images of the Dreadnoughts. 12 of them. Enormous, looming behemoths, each one easily 5 times the size of our largest battle cruisers. They absorbed light, casting no reflection, just an impenetrable darkness that seemed to warp the very space around them. Impossible. Choi whispered, his voice barely audible. Park's fingers flew across the console, confirming the readings. They're not human vessels, she said, her voice cracking under the weight of the discovery. These ships are something else entirely. Far beyond anything we've seen before. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. We had thought we were the unstoppable force, the galaxy's dominant power. But now, as I stared at the massive dreadnoughts materializing before us, I realized with a sinking feeling in my chest, the true battle had just begun. As our fleet advanced through the silent vastness of space, a strange ripple in the fabric of the universe appeared before us, a tear in space-time that pulsed with an eerie, unnatural rhythm. It began as a thin line, jagged and uneven, like a crack in glass. At first, it was barely noticeable, a mere distortion in the stars, but then the rip began to widen, stretching and expanding like the mouth of some cosmic beast. The cold blackness of space shuddered in response, as if the very fabric of reality was bending under an invisible weight. Impossible, Commander Choi whispered, his voice barely audible over the low hum of the command deck. His gaze was fixed on the rift, a growing sense of dread in his eyes. Nothing like this has ever been recorded. My 4 eyes narrowed as I focused on the expanding rift, the tension thickening in the room. There was no explanation for this anomaly. No known technology could tear through the very essence of space in this way. It defied every law we understood. Then, from the heart of the rift, massive shapes began to emerge, monolithic, imposing, and dark. Their forms were angular, like jagged obsidian mountains carved from the blackness of the void itself. These were no human ships. They were too vast, too alien in every sense. Commander, are we seeing this? I asked, my voice trembling as the first of the ships fully emerged, blotting out the stars in its path. The sheer size of these vessels was beyond comprehension, easily 5 times larger than our largest battle cruisers. The surface of each ship seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, casting a long, unsettling shadow across the deck of my flagship, Eternal Glory. The hulls of the ships were smooth, featureless, except for the occasional pulse of energy that rippled across their surfaces like living veins of electricity. Choi's voice was strained, disbelief creeping into his tone. They're not human ships. What in the stars are they? I could hardly comprehend what was happening. This wasn't a new human weapon. These ships were beyond human capability, beyond anything I had ever seen. I had heard whispers of Earth's hidden technology, but this was something entirely different, something that felt ancient. These ships were not built for conquest. They were born from the darkness itself, like they had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. On the tactical display, the Dreadnoughts moved into position, their enormous silhouettes forming a perfect, impenetrable circle around our fleet. The eerie stillness of space was broken only by the sharp beeping of the sensors, the sudden increase in energy readings as the enemy ships powered up their systems. Every movement of theirs was deliberate, precise, as if they had been waiting in the wings for centuries. Then, from the lead Dreadnought, a calm, measured voice echoed across our comm system. This is Captain Kong of the Earth Defense Force, Dreadnought Division. You are surrounded. Power down your weapons. The words felt like a slap to the face. My heart skipped a beat, and I could feel the weight of disbelief pressing down on me. The voice was eerily composed, its calmness in stark contrast to the dire situation at hand. For a moment, I stood frozen, my mind racing for an explanation. My fleet, the pride of the Hegemony, was now at the mercy of these creatures. How had we been so blind? I forced myself to regain composure, straightening my posture as much as possible despite the sense of impending doom. This is Admiral Kim of the Galactic Hegemony, I said, my voice colder now, carrying the weight of authority. We do not recognize your authority. But Captain Kang's voice, calm and unflinching, responded immediately, as if expecting my defiance. What you've been fighting for the past 10 years, he said, was merely our screening force. What you see before you is Earth's true military power. His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. For 10 years, we had fought a war against what we believed to be a weak, primitive species, unknowingly playing into their hands. The entire conflict had been a charade, a ruse to deceive us, to make us believe they were on the brink of defeat when in fact, they had been hiding their true strength, their true weapons, from us all along. The human resistance, we had believed, was nothing more than a desperate last stand. But now, as the Dreadnoughts surrounded us, it became abundantly clear, Earth had been playing a long game, and they had won. I felt a surge of frustration and anger, the kind that comes with realizing you've been outplayed. For all our superior technology, for all our might, we were powerless in the face of what was now before us. These ships, these Dreadnoughts, were no ordinary fleet. They were a revelation, a force that would change everything we knew about the galaxy. And they were here, waiting, poised to strike. Admiral Park, my science officer, spoke up, her voice laced with urgency. We can't track their energy signatures. They're absorbing our scans, blocking our sensors. Their technology is beyond anything we've encountered. The ships before us seemed to shimmer, their presence warping space around them as if they existed in a different dimension, one that was not bound by the same rules that governed the rest of the universe. I could feel the weight of their power pressing down on us, suffocating us in ways that mere weapons could never achieve. The Dreadnoughts began to move, each one gliding through space with an elegance that belied their enormous size. They were precision incarnate, cold, methodical, unstoppable. And we, the proud Hegemony fleet, were now at their mercy. The realization was slow to settle in, but it hit me with the force of a meteor. We had miscalculated. We had underestimated humanity. These ships were not just a military force, they were a message. And Earth was sending it loud and clear. They were no longer the weak, primitive species we had so easily conquered in the past. They were something else entirely. The battle for Earth was not over. It had only just begun. The silence in space was deafening as the last of our fleet disintegrated before the Dreadnoughts' overwhelming firepower. A single shot from one of the massive ships sent an entire battle cruiser into nothingness, its twisted remains scattered across the void like debris from a forgotten nightmare. The light of distant stars flickered and died, swallowed by the growing darkness that now surrounded us. The pride of the Hegemony, the culmination of millennia of conquest and expansion, was being wiped away with frightening ease. My mind raced as I watched our fleet crumble. Every ship, every weapon, every strategy we had relied on was useless in the face of this unknown enemy. And in that moment, as the last of our forces fell, I whispered the question that had been haunting me since the Dreadnoughts first emerged: what have we awakened? The battle was over in a matter of hours, but the consequences of that battle would last for an eternity. My ship, the Eternal Glory, was now drifting through the wreckage of what was once a mighty fleet. The eerie silence of space was broken only by the occasional ping of sensors and the hum of failing systems. We were the last to survive, our once proud flagship now reduced to a shell of its former self. I was escorted to the command center of Earth's forces, where Admiral Lee awaited me. She stood in front of a massive viewport, her figure framed by the swirling chaos of distant stars. Her eyes, cold and calculating, met mine with an intensity one had never seen before. There was no triumph in her gaze, only the weariness of a soldier who had fought a battle that few would ever understand. "You were right to underestimate us," she said, her voice calm but filled with an underlying strength. "But that was the plan all along." I was silent, struggling to find words. Everything I had believed, everything I had fought for, had been shattered. The humans, whom I had once thought of as a mere obstacle in the grand scheme of the Hegemony's expansion, were now the galaxy's last line of defense. "You were a distraction," Admiral Lee continued, her voice growing softer as she turned to face me. "For centuries, we've been fighting a war you never knew about. A war against entities that exist in a dimension adjacent to ours." I felt the weight of her words pressing down on me. These entities, these beings from beyond our comprehension, had been the true threat all along. The Hegemony's ambitions, my ambitions, had been nothing more than a side note in a much larger, far more dangerous conflict. The humans, in their secrecy, had been watching, waiting, hiding their true power from the rest of the galaxy. As she spoke, a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the room, casting a pale blue light across the darkened walls. It showed the swirling mass of the void entities, formless shapes of pure darkness, constantly shifting and moving, their very presence warping the space around them. There was no light in the void, only the eerie glow of distant energy, the pulsing rhythm of something that should not exist. "They've been trying to break through into our dimension for as long as we've known," Admiral Lee explained. "For centuries, we've kept them at bay, using the power we've hidden from you, from everyone. We created the Dreadnoughts to protect not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. The Hegemony was never the true enemy. The void entities are. And now, the time has come for us to unite, for us to finally face this threat together." The weight of her words struck me like a blow. The humans, weak, primitive humans, had known about this war, this existential threat, long before we ever laid eyes on their world. They had been fighting a battle in the shadows, hidden from the galaxy's view, while we had focused on petty squabbles and expansion. "The war you've been fighting for the past 10 years, Admiral Lee said, her voice becoming more resolute, was nothing more than a charade. A test to see how we could manage our resources, how we could keep our true power concealed. We needed the Hegemony to believe we were weak, to believe we were primitive. And we played our part well." The realization hit me like a storm. Earth had never been the weak, vulnerable species we had believed them to be. They had been hiding their strength, watching us make our moves, knowing that one day we would push them too far. And now, the time had come for us to learn the truth. As we sat in the council chamber, watching the display of the void entities, I realized that the galaxy's fate rested in Earth's hands. These humans, whom I had underestimated for so long, were the only ones capable of stopping the entities from breaking through into our dimension. They had been the ones guarding the galaxy's edge for centuries, all while we had been blind to their true capabilities. Admiral Lee turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "The time has come for you to choose, Admiral Kim. You can return to the Hegemony, take this truth with you, and try to convince your people to join us. Or, you can walk away and let the galaxy face its fate alone. But make no mistake, this war is not over. It has only just begun." I stood there, my mind racing. The Hegemony had once been the dominant force in the galaxy, but now, I saw the truth. Our arrogance had blinded us to the greater threat. Earth had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And now, that moment had arrived. The choice was clear. The Hegemony could no longer afford to be a conqueror. We needed to become allies, to unite against the true enemy. But could we, set aside centuries of pride and ambition for the sake of survival? As the holographic display flickered, showing the vast, swirling darkness of the void entities, I understood. The galaxy was at the brink of destruction, and the humans, the ones we had tried to conquer, were our last hope. "Prepare the fleet," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "We have a new mission now. Earth will not stand alone. The battle may be over, but the war is far from won. Earth's true strength has been revealed, but the galaxy's darkest secrets are just beginning to unfold. What's next for humanity, and what dangers await us beyond the stars? Drop your thoughts, theories, or even a secret code in the comments. Let's see if you can crack the mysteries of the galaxy before they unfold. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future revelations. The story is just getting started, and you won't want to be left behind.